We dive into another crossover Thursday, this time with Locked On Rams, next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we return here on a Thursday, which means it is crossover Thursday. And since the Ravens are playing the Los Angeles Rams in Week 17, we will be diving into a full 3 segments with Sosa, Kremenjas of Locked On Rams. And this game for the Ravens, it's a must-win. I mean, both their games now, Week 17 and 18, are must-wins if they want to get into the postseason. And, they put themselves in a position and then they lost the 4 straight. And, it's been injuries and COVID and everything else. But at the same time, the Ravens still have a goal. They still have a job to do. And that starts in Week 17 against the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll dive into crossover Thursday with Locked On Rams. Before we do that, though, be sure to follow us anywhere you get your podcast. So in audio form, that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. If you're here with us on YouTube and you can see my face and my background, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate everybody who has already subscribed to the channel. And if you haven't, please feel free to do so. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. And thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. So without any further ado, let's dive into crossover Thursday with Sosa, Kremenjas of Locked On Rams.
Rams Nation, Ravens Nation, thank you guys for joining us for another episode here, Locked On Rams, Locked On Ravens. As you can probably tell if you're watching on YouTube, it's another crossover. Thursday? Yeah, crossover Thursday. I lost my days there for a second. Episode here. I'm Sosa Kremenjas, your host of Locked On Rams, joined by my guy Kevin Ostreicher, host of Locked On Ravens. We head into this game here in Week 17 between 2 interesting football teams. Right now, the Los Angeles Rams sitting at 11-4 in the 3rd seeded spot in the NFC playoff race. They're basically cemented already. They clinched a playoff spot. They're feeling probably pretty decent here, fighting for that NFC West title, still trying to get, seeding down here. While on the other side, the Baltimore Ravens kind of in a stickier situation. I believe they're sitting at 8th right now in the AFC playoff race at 8-7. Got some ground to make up when it comes to that division. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, you guys watched that game last week. I'm sure most of the listeners probably didn't love that one so much, but we'll put that in the past. We'll get into this game here. 2 teams that don't see each other often, Kevin. The last time they played, it was not that fun for Rams fans. I could promise you that. I watched that game. That might have been, we said this off air, I told you, that might have been the worst performance I've seen from a Sean McVay team since he took over as the head coach. So I know Rams fans are kind of not hoping for that repeat there. When you look at this quarterback, there's a lot of questions here. Tyler Huntley, COVID list. We don't know if he's going to go. Lamar Jackson, he's got the ankle stuff. What does it look like at this spot? We're, recording fairly early in the week, so I know it's hard to say, but that video came out. Lamar doesn't look all too well right now.
No, yeah, so he's kind of limping around a little bit out there. We saw the video put out by a couple Ravens reporters on that Bermuda grass. I saw, people sometimes they see the it looks dead almost, the grass, and it's just dormant for now. I know the Ravens have gotten a lot of questions about it, but he's throwing, not really stepping into the throw as much as you would want to see, and kind of jogging, limping a little bit. And those bone bruises can be kind of complicated, for a player like Jackson, who, we all know how well he can throw the football, but has that extra element of mobility. And that's what makes him so dangerous. For a player like him, putting him out there at 60, 70%, or any player, as a matter of fact, but that can present a couple of problems. For one, you're not getting the results that you need on the field from that player because they're just not healthy enough to produce those results. And 2, the risk of re-injury can be real. So I know the Ravens aren't going to try to rush him back. They're going to want to feel confident with their doctors and their decision makers to say, all right, is Lamar Jackson as close to 100% as we can get him to where we can feel confident without that re-injury? If not, the Ravens have a couple of guys waiting in the wings. You mentioned Tyler Huntley, although we don't know at this point whether he's going to be off the COVID list or not for this game. If he is, then he's the number 2 for sure. He's shown some very, very nice flashes, but If he's not able to come back, then Josh Johnson would be the guy, it seems like. And Johnson played decently well for the Ravens on Sunday in Week 16 against Cincinnati. He's traveled almost everywhere, it seems like. It's a second stint in the Ravens uniform. So it's a little bit just unclear, I'd call it, at the Ravens quarterback position right now. But I think the good thing about having all this depth is regardless of who is out there, obviously Jackson is their best quarterback and their best player. But if he's not able to go, Baltimore, I think, feels confident knowing they have Huntley and Johnson, who have shown that they can lead the offense down the field and make some stuff happen.
Yeah, and I want to flip to the other side of the ball. I've actually said this many times on Twitter. I think the Baltimore Ravens are the best run organization in the sport. Like, I genuinely do. They just find ways to always restock talent. They do it similar to the Rams, let guys walk for compensatory picks, find other guys to step up. So I'm looking at the secondary right now. I think we all kind of know, throughout the season, they lost many good players. Former Ram Marcus Peters before the season begins. Marlon Humphrey, of course, one of the best corners in football. I've seen some news. I believe Jimmy Smith is back. This is a guy that's been with the Ravens forever. It feels like he's been good forever. Can you kind of delve into the secondary and how it looks right now? I hate to keep, harping on these injury issues, but it's really so important when it gets down to this game.
No, it is. And, what I say is injuries cap a ceiling of any team. It's not just the Ravens here. For example, would you rather have J.K. Dobbins or Latavius Murray? The answer there is pretty clear to me. So they always cap a ceiling of a team, and for the Ravens, it's been constant. So the injuries are important to talk about. In the secondary has probably been one of the hardest hit positions, if not the hardest hit. Marlon Humphrey's out for the season. Marcus Peters, as you mentioned, I'm sad we got robbed of seeing him in this game. I know he was very entertaining in the last one, at least to Ravens fans and people who cover the team. But Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey, 2 All-Pros, are both done for the year. They've been missing Humphrey for a couple weeks, Peters for the entire season. Anthony Averett, who was acting as their number 1 cornerback, suffered a rib injury in Week 16, and we don't know his status as of right now, whether he'll play or not, but, it could be kind of a long shot, but we'll wait and see on that. Tavon Young, who actually has been the Ravens' most injured cornerback over the past 5 seasons, is actually healthy right now, so it's a start. Jimmy Smith, you talked about, isn't the player he once was, but is still able to at least give them snaps. They have Chris Westry, who is a 6'4" corner, runs a 4.3 40. So the athletic specimen, but very raw. He's still kind of learning his way across the league. And then other than that, you have practice squad guys who are getting called up. And it's just been that kind of season for them where they have guys playing tons of snaps who hadn't played a single defensive snap heading into that certain game. So the secondary is very beat up right now. And even you can talk about the safety. Deshaun Elliott, the starter, out for the year. He's had to be replaced by a rookie in Brandon Stevens, who actually played corner in college. And before that, played running back for his first 2 years of school. So they're kind of digging deep to find these bodies to help them play. But there's no doubt that the injuries have affected that unit in a big way.
Yeah, if anyone knows really what that's like, it's got to be Rams fans. You look back to a few weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams are starting guys they're calling up from the practice squad the day of, and it was all because of COVID. Jalen Ramsey can't go. Dante Dion can't go. So I know Rams fans can have some sympathy in that regard when it comes to that cornerback room. I want to flip to the other side of the ball. Definitely got to highlight this guy, Mark Andrews. I know you've probably talked about him a lot this season. One of the best tight ends in football, one of the most dangerous threats in general. And the reason I want to talk about this guy is just not because he's great, right? This is only one half of it. I think there's a big mismatch potential here for the Ravens because you look on the other side of the ball for the Rams. They're on defense. They lose rookie linebacker Ernest Jones last week. He's got to go on IR now short term. He's getting an ankle surgery there. And then you also look at Taylor Rapp not practicing right now as of today. Might go in this game, might not 100% sure. But in general, I don't think covering tight ends is probably one of their strong suits. Their linebackers are very limited in terms of their range, their safeties. They don't really use them that much when it comes to covering tight ends. How has this offense sort of funneled through this guy, and how do they continue to feature him?
Yeah, well, so Mark Andrews has been probably, at least over the past couple of weeks, the Ravens' best offensive player for sure. And he's coming up on all kinds of records, has already broken them. What the Ravens love to do with Andrews is use him in a bunch of different ways. He's not just going to be an inline guy who runs comebackers and outs and everything. They'll use him in the middle of the field. They'll use him on the outside. They'll use him everywhere. And teams have to respect that. And something that makes this Ravens offense different, at least this season, is the weapons around Andrews and what they have surrounded Lamar Jackson with in terms of pass catchers, because it's not just Andrews and Marquise Brown anymore. It was usually, all right, one team can focus in on one of those guys. The other one will kind of have a decently big game, but no one else is going to be a factor. Now what you have is guys like Rashad Bateman and even Sammy Watkins. You have James Prochet, Devin Duvernay, some of the younger wide receivers the Ravens have invested draft capital in. So teams have to respect that, and that takes attention away from Andrews. So whether you want to send that safety help over the top, if Andrews is beating you deep or if he's doing stuff over the middle of the field, the Ravens can have James Prochet beat a corner one-on-one, or they can do stuff like that. So I think that's one of the biggest things where this Ravens offense has been able to feature Andrews more, is because there's less attention. And I know that sounds weird because Andrews is, this guy who you should be putting a ton of attention to. But at the same time, the guys around Andrews are professional football players for a reason. They are talented football players, and they can burn you. So if you hone in on one guy, teams can beat you elsewhere. And I think that's something that the Ravens can definitely exploit with the Rams. You mentioned their inside linebacking crew and some of the safeties as well. And there's unfortunately no chance for a Kenny Young revenge game anymore, which, at the beginning of the year, we could have been talking about if he wasn't traded away.
Yeah. The Rams moved on now in Denver. So, the Rams are never going to sit on their hands. These guys trade away and for players more than probably any other team in football. The last question here, I wanted to dive in on some of these younger players. You mentioned one of them, Rashad Bateman, another guy on the defensive side of the ball, Odafe Owe. These are guys that I really loved coming out. I'm sure a lot of people who watched the draft knew very well who they were. I believe both first-round picks, if I'm not mistaken. Can you sort of talk about their development going throughout this season and even their outlook going into next year?
Well, these were two home run slam dunk picks for Eric DeCosta and company. I mean, getting Bateman and Owe in a span of 3 picks is very impressive. And the rumors that came out were that the Ravens were pretty fixated on either Gregory Rousseau or Odafe Owe with their second first-round pick that was number 31. Rousseau went 30 to the Bills, and so the Ravens said, hey, all right, let's take Owe with 31. And that was the pick they got from the Orlando Brown Jr. trade. We'll start with Bateman first, though. Bateman looks great. Missed the first couple of weeks of the season with an injury he suffered in training camp, but looks very spry. He's a very athletic player. He's not, a burner or anything, but he can beat you deep. His route running is amazing. I'll even call it exquisite. And he's somebody who, when he has the ball in his hands, good things happen. He just scored his first career NFL touchdown last week against Cincinnati. So he kind of has that chip off of his shoulder, but is still probably playing with one because, there were players like Kadarius Toney picked over him and others that, were very talented, but people had Bateman in that early 20s range. He ends up going in the late 20s, and he's somebody who is just a compliment to what this team does on offense and is, even turning himself into somewhat of a reliable security blanket early on. And for Owe, he's been up and down this season, started the year really, really strong. Got a sack in his first NFL game after not having one in his final collegiate season at Penn State. I know a lot of people kind of took that and said, how can you draft a player who had no sacks last year in the first round? And, he ends up getting a sack in his first game, but had that strong start, kind of tapered off a little bit over the middle of the year, and then has now come back on. He's able to get pressure in a ton of different ways. He is an athletic freak. He's crazy fast, crazy big, crazy strong, all these different things you want out of a young outside linebacker. Also hasn't been playing football for that long, so there's plenty of room for growth. So it's encouraging to see both of them not only contribute now in the present, but to think about what they can do in the future.
Yeah, we did the ultimate mock draft here on the Locked On Network. I want to say a few months ago, probably right around draft time. And I had the Rams taking Owe, which at the time was Jason Owe. So I'm very familiar with how this guy rolls. And I do like the fact that he stepped up this season because that is a guy that has all the talent in the world. And I know the Ravens are the one kind of organization that can absolutely extract that and make him the player that he needs to be. So in just a second here, we're going to flip the tables. My man Kevin's going to start to ask me some questions about the Los Angeles Rams. Sure, you guys want to hear more about that. Before we get there, though, in just a second, the Los Angeles Rams favored in this game. We'll dive into that in the final segment. See, where we're sitting with these score predictions and some of these matchups and things like that to watch. Bet online, of course, if you guys want to get in on some of the action to bet. I like to bet on here on Locked On Ravens. We always talk about it. Not a betting professional, all right? This is not advice, but BetOnline has you covered not just this holiday season, but even after the holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all these sports action this season. So go head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. All you have to do, just use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus from football, basketball, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait. Make sure to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
The Ravens and the Rams set to take on each other here in Week 17, and we are back with our Locked On Ravens and Locked On Rams crossover. I'm expecting a great game here, to be honest. I know the Ravens dealing with some injury issues. The Rams are, it seemed with a ton of talent on both sides of the ball here, but Sosa, I think I need to start with Matthew Stafford, the quarterback who came in to replace Jared Goff. The Rams have done a bunch of, what many deem all-in moves. And I think Stafford was the penultimate one when you think about it, because the quarterback being the most important position. And Stafford this season for the Rams has been pretty good overall, I'd say, right? 4,339 yards, 36 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, averaging 8.1 yards per pass and 292.2 yards per game. I mean, So was this the right move? And have all these moves for the Rams been the right moves for you to kind of speed up this timeline for them and get them closest to a Super Bowl championship with the pieces they have now?
I tend to think that they were the right moves. I know that, each of them is sort of in a vacuum where we can discuss a little bit more. Like you look at Von Miller, they trade a second and a third round pick for him mid-season. The returns haven't been that great per se. You look at the sack numbers, only one sack. The pressure is not exactly there, but an elite run stuffer. And I know that pays a lot for the Rams right now because they run, fewer heavy boxes or heavy fronts than any other team in football. And they can, afford to do that because the guys they have up front are really good run stuffers. So that one, we'll see how that one comes out. I guess you don't trade for Von Miller to go win you week 11. You trade for Von Miller. So when you're playing Tom Brady in the NFC Championship game and it's 3rd and 7, he goes to make a play, right? So that one we'll put to the side. Matthew Stafford, though, I think this was the right move. The Rams had a quarterback issue, and a lot of people always bring up the fact that Jared Goff is almost as good or was as good. And I think the mistake that they were making was they were looking at Jared Goff in 2018, which at the time, was a potential MVP guy. This guy brought the Rams to the Super Bowl. He was great. But the problem was 2018, Jared Goff was many years gone. 2019 regressed. 2020 regressed even more, turned into a not injury prone, I guess, turnover prone kind of quarterback there. And that was the issue. And so the Rams go out, trade a bunch of picks, 2 first-round picks, and plus Goff and a little bit more for Stafford. And he's had some up and downs for sure. There's certain games like he's coming off one against the Minnesota Vikings where he throws 3 interceptions. And you see some of those boneheaded plays every now and again that just kind of don't want to allow you to put him in that elite tier of quarterback. He's just not there yet. I don't know that he'll ever get there, but he's a top 10 guy, I think, firmly. And you feel very good about what he can give you, right? Because even in a game where he throws 3 interceptions like the Vikings game, the offense still finds a way to put up 30 points or, 23.7 more on special teams, and they still find a way to win games. So there's been some lulls, some up and downs, the San Francisco game, the Titans game, the Vikings game. But outside of that, you talk about a guy that's out-dueled Tom Brady in week 3 and a guy that has your offense humming really for the most part. I think you feel pretty good about the early returns, and I do think that Stafford gives you a better shot to go deep in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the Rams right now ranked 2nd in the NFL in net yards per attempt through the air, so that pass offense is humming. And, an area I want to talk about, though, Sosa, is the run offense, because the Rams are 22nd in yards per attempt through 16 weeks this year. They have Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson, and the miraculous, and I don't say that lightly, miraculous return of Cam Akers, who I know many in LA were excited about entering the season. How has that run game looked to you? Has it been to your expectations before the year, a little better, a little worse? Where are you right now and what they've done on the ground?
Yeah, so I think for the most part, if you look at it from a grand perspective over the course of the season, probably been a little bit underwhelming. Darrell Henderson, he hasn't had that gear this season. I'm not really sure why. I have a theory, once Cam Akers went down in training camp, I think Henderson might have, put on a few pounds purposely just to try and last throughout the season. This is a guy that's had some injury concerns in the past. And it sort of just sapped, the thing that he brought to the table, which is acceleration and speed. And then, he gets injured. Now he's out for the season. He's on short-term IR as well. Just got placed there the other day. And they've transitioned to the Sony Michel show a few weeks back since that injury occurred with Henderson. He also got COVID at the time. And I think it's been picking up a lot more now. The one thing that Michel doesn't bring to you is, game-breaking speed. He's not going to hit those 40, 50-yard runs or the long touchdowns, but you talk about a guy that can grind in between the tackles. He can get you those 3 extra 4 yards through contact. That's what he really does well, grinds his feet, keeps you in, manageable down and distances ahead of the chains. Those are the things that he brings to the table. So I think if you look at it over the past month, Michel been one of the better running backs in football, and the Rams finally starting to find the running game, and it's really supplemented their offense. But if you look at the whole grand scheme, it's been subpar. But now you mentioned Akers back. He might play in this game. I'm not exactly sure, what kind of role he's going to have. He might play, 3 or 4 snaps, just kind of get that conditioning up a little bit, but wouldn't expect much out of him either way. I think the Rams are going to try to conserve Akers for the playoffs, but as of right now, I think the returns are much better in the past month with Michel than they were with Henderson.
Yeah, and someone who the Rams have gotten great returns on is Cooper Kupp. Man, that even might be an understatement because Kupp has had the best year of any wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, 1,734 yards, still 2 games to go here. Sosa, how in the world do you stop Cooper Kupp? Is there a way to stop Cooper Kupp? Are the Ravens going to have the most success giving him the Devontae Adams treatment? Then you have to worry about, all right, what's Odell Beckham going to do? But at this point, with how decimated the Ravens secondary is, we talked about that in the first segment, they might just have to, because with the players that the Ravens might trot out there on Sunday, I don't know that any of them can stop Cooper Kupp. So, Sosa, if you were Don Martindale and the Ravens, how would you stop Cooper Kupp?
I think I might pull out that double or triple kind of coverage here. I think that might be the move because the Rams want to go through Cooper Kupp. This is the engine of their offense. You mentioned it. And they got a lot of good players, right? That's kind of the concern is you have Odell Beckham, you have Van Jefferson, guys that have made plays this season. But if I'm, Wink Martindale, I trust, my guys to try to shut down Cooper Kupp. I'd rather let anybody else on that offense try to beat me, right? That's kind of the goal, I think, at the end of the day. But it's a lot easier said than done, too, because there's only so many things you can do in coverage and things like that. So in general, I think your best bet is to really just try to give him underneath stuff and rally upwards and tackle maybe, on important down and distances, 3rd and 7, those kinds of areas. Stafford is going to be looking his way. Those are the times I might introduce a little bit of bracket coverage or, roll safety help that way. But it's been hard. This is a guy that is on pace right now to break Calvin Johnson's single season receiving record by 1 yard, by 1 single yard, which is insane to say. And I know a lot of people are going to downplay and say the extra game, and that's great, whatever. But even if it wasn't the extra game, this guy's going to have an 1,800-yard season. That is absurd. So been very hard to stop. I think he's only had 1 game this season so far with under 90 receiving yards, which is like the first time that's ever happened in NFL history. So they're funneling their offense through this guy. And I think at some point, if you can hold him to 90 yards, that's a win. That's not like an embarrassing performance. I think that's a win. So, you just got to try and stop him from creating the big plays downfield, which he's done a lot more this season. But in general, it'll certainly be hard, I think, for the Ravens, especially with how banged up that secondary is.
Right. We all know the player Cooper Kupp is. The Ravens know what the player is. The Rams do. So I agree. I think, let anyone else beat you. But if it's Kupp and it's coming, you just have to devote resources there, whether it's putting 2 guys there, safety up over the top. You have to do what you can to stop Kupp because you know it's coming. So you have to plan for it as best as you can. But so before we head into our final break, I do want to talk a bit about the Rams defense and ask you about some of the strengths and weaknesses. Now, the Rams, in terms of net yards per attempt, the 3rd best run defense in the NFL. Obviously, there's a pretty good defensive lineman on that defensive front by the name of Aaron Donald, who actually in 2019, we were talking about this off air too. The Ravens stifled him to just 1 total tackle, which is pretty unheard of in the Aaron Donald era in Los Angeles. So what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this Rams defense overall through these first 16 weeks?
Yeah, like you mentioned, the run defense, I think first and foremost has just been outstanding. And it's really everyone across the board. We talked about Von Miller a few minutes ago. Aaron Donald's sort of that penetrator. He's not going to hold up double teams. He's going to penetrate in the backfield, make more, tackles for loss than probably any other player in football. Greg Gaines, very, very good developing nose tackle, been outstanding for the Rams up there. Ashard Robinson, they've had an embarrassment of riches really across the board. Leonard Floyd, one of the best edge, defenders when it comes to stopping the run too. So they're good really across the board, I think, up front, whether it's stopping the run or getting to passers. Maybe not, at a clip that we expected with that talent that they have. You kind of expect them to get after quarterbacks consistently almost every other play. But in general, been really good up front. In the secondary, been a little bit up and down. I think obviously Jalen Ramsey's out there, so that's going to be a strength. But outside of him, been very inconsistent. The play there. Taylor Rapp has been weak in coverage at times. Darius Williams, inconsistent season, not great for him. It's been a contract year for him. So, he's obviously trying to put his best tape out there. Then they finally find a 3rd corner in Dante Dion now, who's playing good football, but he's kind of been in and out of the lineup as well. COVID stuff like that. So I'd say the one biggest weakness has to be attack the linebackers in coverage. Travin Howard is going to be out there starting his first game this season in place of Ernest Jones, who we mentioned. He's no longer, active, I guess you could say. Troy Reeder, definitely a place you want to try to take advantage of in the passing game. Taylor Rapp, if he plays in this game too. So a lot of strengths. There's definitely some weaknesses too, though. I still think they're trying to feel themselves out. This is the first year for defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, but I would say just like the running game over the past month, things have been a lot better for those guys.
Yeah, and for the Ravens, starting fast, I think, is going to be a key for them because they've done it over the past couple of weeks. But against the secondary, and you mentioned the linebackers, getting Mark Andrews involved, as we talked about as well, that'll be key. But we'll talk about more keys to this game and final score predictions in our final segment. So we'll head into our final break here. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back now to the final segment. We're going to pick up. We got some interesting things to talk about, maybe some matchups. Of course, we're going to share our score prediction, where the line is sitting at right now. It might shift. You never know. Lamar Jackson, if he's healthy, I'm sure that line might come down a little bit in favor of the Rams. But before we get there, just wanted to quickly thank you guys so much for always making Locked On Rams, Locked On Ravens your first daily listen. For your second, go check out Locked On Bets. They will help you out with your betting game. I mentioned them, a few minutes ago, not a betting expert, but these guys, they know a lot more than me. Your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Now, Kevin, this is our time right here. We'll get into this final segment. We could dive into some storylines, matchups, any things you want to talk about. Of course, a score prediction. And as it sits right now at BetOnline, the Rams are favored by 3.5. So fairly, decent spread there, especially with the Rams on the road. Typically, road teams are not always favored, but I think it's probably fair right now, with where both teams are in terms of their injury designations and some of the uncertainties, especially at quarterback. You talk about Lamar Jackson there. I'll kick it to you first. We can go through the Ravens and then go with the Rams. Is there any kind of storylines or any kind of matchups that you're sort of looking out for here? We mentioned in the first segment, the Rams clinched the playoff spot. The Ravens, not yet, but throughout our lifetimes, this is unusual. I'm used to seeing the Ravens always competing, never mind fighting for a playoff spot.
Right, and that's what's so different this year, because heading into the season, with all the talent they had on their roster, people were saying, wow, this team, could they make a Super Bowl? Could they make the AFC Championship game? And now you have it to the point where they just have barely any of their stars left. There are still some, and it's important and easy to say, like, oh, the Ravens are so impacted, but look, so are all the other teams in the NFL. But for people to say, oh, there's an injury excuse here, it's not so much of an excuse anymore as it is a reality. And that's not to say like, oh, like the Rams aren't affected or the Chiefs or the Bengals or whoever. But for the Ravens, a huge storyline is, how are they going to stop Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp? Because if you let those two players beat you when you know it's coming, I don't think there's anything you can do to win this game. And this is a game that Baltimore needs to win. They have to win their final two games. If they had beaten Cincinnati, it would be a different story. But look, this is go time for them. The Rams have clinched the playoff spot. They can kind of relax a little bit. But for the Ravens, they are in serious danger now. I think 10-7 is enough to get them into the playoffs. I do not think 9-8 is. It would leave them with a very small chance to, if that were the case, in an AFC conference that is pretty loaded with those like 8-7, 9-6 records. So for me, being able to stop some of the Rams' top playmakers, as it is for every team, is a very important task for them. And whether that is just spending so many resources on it and making other players beat you, I think that's where it starts. But so what about you? What for this Rams team do you think is key if they have a shot at beating this Ravens team?
Yeah, I think, when you look at this team, I'm just picturing 7 guys lined up, across the line of scrimmage, blitzing all out. We know, Martindale is going to be all excited about bringing pressure. And I think that's concerning for the Rams, right? Because there's been a lot of shuffling on this offensive line, guys that have dropped out due to COVID, guys that are coming back, injuries to center Brian Allen. So been a lot of movement, guys from left guard to left tackle, back to left guard to center. So I think first thing is you want to get that communication down. This is a team that is going to bring a lot of different kinds of looks, similar to what the Vikings do last, week. They're going to bring up some of those double A gap, mug type of pressures and looks like that. So first thing is make sure that, the quarterback knows where his hot read is, knows to get the football out, not get killed back there, and the offensive line to try to give him as much protection as possible. And, if they can do that, of course, they will have a decent shot to hold up, and the receivers might win at some point. But that's the first thing I think. Just try to establish the ground game as well, stay in those manageable down and distances. And then on the other side of the ball, it's going to be tough, I think. It's hard to say with Lamar Jackson right now. If he's healthy, I'd be gravely concerned trying to defend this guy. I have no idea how you do it. Yes, you can draw up all the schemes you want, but at the end of the day, he's just faster than everyone else. That's just the point blank period bottom line here, right? This guy moves at a different speed, and it's a lot easier for us to sit on the couch and say, yeah, you can tackle him here. Good luck doing it in open space. So really depends on the health there. Is he going to be able to, be Lamar Jackson, the guy we know and love that's going to, leave the pocket and make guys look silly? And if not, then you probably want to keep him inside that pocket, try to make him a passer and not some of those electric plays that we know he can create as a runner. And then we'll see, can he drive off that foot? How much is it going to affect his accuracy? Is it going to affect his ability to run? How much, speed and acceleration can he pick up? So it's really the biggest storyline, I think, for both sides, the health of Lamar Jackson right now, because he is the key that can change everything for both teams. I'll kick it over to you now. If you want to give a score prediction, please feel free. If you want to talk about the line, if they're going to cover or not, like I mentioned, Rams -3.5 right now. The floor is all yours, my friend.
Yeah, I think, I have the Rams winning by more than 3 in this game. It pains me to say this because, as I talked about, I don't think the Ravens make the playoffs without this win. But this was a game I picked before the year as the Ravens losing. And I had said, this is a key stretch for them, especially because the Rams are an NFC opponent where this loss won't necessarily derail their season if they put themselves in a situation to make the playoffs in week 18 or whatnot. But, with 4 straight losses, 3 of those coming by a combined 4 points, it's been tough for them. And the reason I say the Ravens aren't going to win or aren't going to win at all is because of the fact that, their secondary is decimated. Now, with Lamar Jackson, there's always a chance. And if Jackson plays, I see situations where look, any quarterback, I see situations where they can win this game. But I saw flashes from this offense in week 16, and I was encouraged by those flashes. The problem was that the secondary let Joe Burrow get a franchise record in passing yards at 525, and the offense, with the injuries, just can't keep up with that. The defense had played very well over those past 3 weeks before week 16. And then it just became all right, look, Cincinnati's a talented team. They have pass-catching weapons and a lot of them. And now you're entering another game where, look, the Rams are a talented team. They have pass-catching weapons and a lot of them. So with Anthony Averett potentially out, with obviously no Humphrey and no Peters, if this becomes hey, the Rams are scoring 35, 40 points, I don't think the Ravens have that firepower on offense anymore to do that. They can maybe put up 30, maybe 35, definitely, but if the secondary can't stop anything like in week 16, that's where I start to get concerned and say, I don't really know. So in terms of an actual score, I'll go Rams 34, Ravens 25, kind of an unconventional final score there. I, again, do see situations where Baltimore wins it, but at this point with the injuries and we just don't know the quarterback situation, I don't see it right now. But Sosa, what about you? What's your score prediction and outcome here for this game?
Yeah, mine is going to be fairly close too. The line is right now 3.5. I don't know that I feel comfortable with the Rams covering, 3.5. I think it's a little bit rich. They're traveling and they played some good football lately, but it doesn't feel like their offense has really been 100% in sync. You look back to last week, the Minnesota Vikings game, like I mentioned, it was awful. I mean, the passing game was just awful. Matthew Stafford, one of the worst games he's had all season. So I'm going to lean with the Rams. I just think they're healthier right now. I trust them a little bit more in terms of the health. I think, they match up well. You talk about the secondary struggling and being hurt. The Rams have a lot of weapons. They don't have to rely on one guy, though they typically do. So I'm going to go with the Rams. I don't think they're going to cover 3.5. I'll say 34, 31, something like that, where it might be like a last possession kind of thing here. And I ultimately think that the Ravens are so talented that you just can't cover, so easily against this team, which is a shame because originally, me and Brad, the former Locked On Rams host, we did a schedule breakdown series prior to the season, and we both had an L for the Rams this week. And I think had the Ravens been healthy, I probably wouldn't have changed from that. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Ravens do come out of this one with a victory. I think there's definitely areas for them to sort of try to exploit here against the Rams, but it's going to be a good game either way. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into another crossover episode, Locked On Rams, Locked On Ravens. Make sure to enjoy this game. Make sure to tune back into both podcasts throughout the rest of this week, as well as next week when we recap these games. Enjoy this game. Make sure to have fun and see you guys in the next one.